Hey everyone, this is the Love of Cinema podcast. We like to talk movies. If you like to talk movies too, you come to the right place.
Honestly speaking, I guess this was my first film as a writer. And I think till date, that is the most organic script I've ever written. We never thought about any kind of formulas or, themes. Let's talk about mental health or let's talk about trauma. We never thought about it at all for even one single second. We just, uh, we just found that story fascinating. We just found those characters fascinating, and that's why we told the story.
14 years ago, Nishikant Kamat made a great film about Mumbai. Mumbai Meri Jaan looks at the city in the days following the serial train bomb blast of 2006 through 5 intertwining stories. A city grappling with paranoia, prejudice, communal and social divides that somehow always manages to muster the courage and show good sense in conquering its fears and prejudice. This is Himanshu, and you're listening to the Love of Cinema podcast. One of those 5 intertwining stories is a story of a pair of cops on patrolling duty. Tukaram Patil, played by the always excellent Paresh Rawal, is a senior cop on verge of retirement. And Kadam, played by the equally good Vijay Maurya, is a young cop who is Tukaram's partner on the patrol beat. For those who haven't watched the film, I would recommend watching the film for this story alone. Now, this isn't to say that the other 4 stories pale in front of this one. Not at all. But it's just that the dynamic between the 2 cops and its arc hits the hardest, nicely condensing the city's angst, its frustration with status quo, and its ability to soldier on in spite of all that. Tukaram Patil's retirement speech, which comes at the very end of the film, is unlike any retirement speech I've seen on film. Because it feels real, it isn't heavily scripted, and it just might move you to tears. It's special. Mumbai Meri Jaan also talks about many other things that not too many films were touching upon back then. Things like the general attitudes of the entitled class towards Mumbai police and the underprivileged migrants, as well as things like acute stress disorder, mental health, and the media's tendency for dousing tragedies with sensationalism. Before moving on, as always, an important request to all listeners of the podcast. If you enjoy organic conversations centered on Indian cinema, Love of Cinema podcast was created for people just like you. So please do consider subscribing. Independent pods like this one don't have a platform for amplification and distribution. Independent pods rely on amplification through its listeners. So if you like the episode, and I can't harp on this enough, please share the episode on social media, because that's the only way people would discover the pod. So again, if you like the episode, please do share it with your friends. Also, do take a minute to review and rate the podcast. That would be much appreciated and would help the podcast. Back to today's episode. To talk more about Mumbai Meri Jaan, I'm delighted to welcome Upendra Sidhaye on the podcast today. He co-wrote Mumbai Meri Jaan and assisted Nishikant Kamat on the film. He has also co-written the excellent Marathi film Me Vasantrao, which if you ask me, is the year's best film. His other writing credits include Killa and the Hindi adaptation of Drishyam. Upendra made his directorial debut in 2019 with the fresh new age Marathi rom-com Girlfriend. During our chat today, Upendra talked about how Mumbai Meri Jaan was written sitting on Mumbai's footpaths, and how Tukaram Patil and Kadam were actually based on a couple of cops from the Ville Parle area. He also mentioned how originally there were supposed to be 9 stories, and shared the gist of the 4 stories which never made it to the final cut. Upendra also talked about how Nishikant Kamat was so much more than a mentor for him, and how Kamat was like an oasis in the manipulative world of movie making. All things Mumbai Meri Jaan with Upendra Sidhaye. Here goes. Hey Upendra, how are you doing?
Hi, Manshu. I'm good. How are you?
Great,
It's
great.
great
It's
thing to
yeah,
come
it's
here.
great to talk to you after all the confusion we have been having with
Yeah.
my power and internet connection and everything. So thank you so much for coming on the podcast today.
Thank
And
you. Thank you.
Mumbai Meri Jaan is one of my favorite films, and I'm so glad that I'm gonna have a chance to talk to you about that film. So once again, thanks a lot, and let's dive
Thank you.
right into it. Upendra, I was thinking that to begin with, before we start talking about the film, co-wrote this film with Yogesh Vinayak Joshi,
Yogesh. Yeah.
and
Yeah.
you are also assisted Nishikant Kamat on the film.
Yeah.
I was wondering if you could talk a little bit about how you got attached to the project before we start talking about the film itself.
Sure. I think it would be incomplete to tell something about myself, how I got into this field, because I was doing chartered accountancy initially in Pune, and there I met a friend who was into movies, who used to watch movies, whose father was a playwright, and that's how I started watching movies. And I guess at the same time, Star Movies and HBO had started their telecast in
Do you
India.
mind sharing
So I
who that
started.
friend was and the playwright?
Yeah, the friend's name was is Tejas Darvi, and
Oh,
whose
okay,
father
yes.
is Ajit Darvi, who wrote Gandhi with the Gandhi play.
Yes, 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 absolutely.
Yeah, so he was in our class in of chartered accountancy. So he was the guy who's always used to talk about movies and stuff. And I joined chartered accountancy not because I wanted to, but because all other friends joined there. So I just followed, and I didn't know what to do in my life. And when I started watching movies, I realized, okay, I have to do something in movies basically. And I used to act in school plays and all, but I didn't want to be actor, so I want to do something else. And eventually then I did master's mass communication course from Pune University, and then I came to Mumbai because of Nishikant Kamat, because my one of my professors, Saman Nakhate, who told me that UTV Motion Pictures is looking for young writers, and there is a guy named Nishikant Kamat there. You just talk to him. And Nishikant Kamath was famous there, famous at that time because of he had written a film called Sachat Gharat,
Yes,
which was a
absolutely.
kind
Yeah,
of
yeah. A
a
huge
super hit
Marathi hit.
film.
Yeah.
Yeah, huge hit. So I went and met him. I talked to him. I also spoke to UTV. There was a proper interview and all this session. And two people were selected. One of them was me. And it was a great initiative by UT Motion Pictures, and their idea was to get writers, upcoming writers, kind of thing, and marry them with a established director so that the content is fresh. So I think intentions were very great, but they didn't pan out as they and we expected. But the plus side was I met Nishikant Kamat, and he had to quit that job because of he wanted to make a Dombly Fast.
Right.
Yeah. And then, so after UTV, I joined him as assistant writer. So he was writing many movies for different directors. And so I was kind of assisting him. So I was on a kind of payroll with a small salary. And but it was great, just watching his process and how to write. So I learned everything from him, how to write and what to write, everything basically. And I distinctly remember I was in Pune, and I was sick. I was down with fever when the blasts happened. And when I recovered, I was thinking about कि अरे इसके बारे में कुछ करना चाहिए या नहीं. And at the same time, I got a call from Nishi, and he said, I'm doing movie on this. We want to do this movie, and there's already a writer on board called Yogesh Joshi. So would you like to join? And I said, yeah, of course, why not? And yeah, that's how the journey began.
That's a great story. So you also worked with Nishikant Kamat on Dombuli Fast?
No, because I was at that time I was still doing that job at YouTube Motion Pictures, but I did a cameo in Dombili Fast.
Who
So
did you
yeah,
play in Dombuli Fast?
so in Dombili Fast there is a huge montage where
Yes.
people are asked about, do you know Madhav Apte? Do you know Madhav Apte?
Yes,
And
yes,
there
yes.
is some seemingly intellectual guy. That is me. Yeah. So
Okay,
like
I got to
he
see it
did
again.
all his friends and colleagues in his
Right,
films.
right.
Like even in Mumbai Meri Jaan, all of the assistants are there.
Yes, yes, yes,
I
yes,
am
yes.
there.
We are going to
So
talk
yeah.
about your
Yeah.
role. Yes, yes, yes. So,
Yeah,
Upendra, while we are on Nishikant Kamath, maybe, we lost him 2 years ago. He was a brilliant storyteller, and Dombili
yeah.
Fast and Mumbai Meri Jaan are great examples of that. You, of course, have worked with him, collaborated with him. What do you remember about Nishikant, and what did you learn from Nishikant? And also, what do you think, in your opinion, made him such a special storyteller?
I think he was all heart, and I know that his image is something different, which is established by Dombili Fast and Mumbai Meri Jaan. But even at the core, and very few people know it about maybe, he was actually a diehard fan of masala movies. He was a diehard fan of Amitabh Bachchan. So when he actually made Laibari, so many people were
Exactly.
surprised.
Yes. Yes.
But we were not, because we knew that Nishi was always big fan of this kind of filmmaking, and he knew that it's tough, and that's why it's a great feat that he could pull off Labhari as well as Dombili Fast as well as Mumbai Marijan as well as Force, which are kind of even Force and Labhari are completely different kind of masala films.
Right.
So I guess he also he never adhered to any kind of formula, and he knew that okay, there is commercial filmmaking, but always story always came first, and technique always came later, and that's what he kind of tried to teach us, or we tried to learn from him. And apart from filmmaking, I guess he was an amazing human being, because I guess I have worked with various on various films apart from Nishi's, and I still think that the atmosphere at on the sets of Nishi's films, or even in his office, uh, I have not seen or experienced anywhere else, and Nishi knew that, and every other person who has worked with Nishi knew that it's like home. You can go any time of the day, and if he's there, he will say, "Okay, aake baith jao." Like, if you want to write and you don't have a place at home, or you need a space, and you can call him and say, "Kya re, mujhe 2 ghanta baithna hai." He say, "Yeah, of course, come it." I've seen him kind of giving place to even for drama rehearsals when a production is not happening, and he's like, "Yeah, yeah, please karo rehearsal aake." So. And he was always grounded. He always asked us to be good, kind of, in this very kind of very manipulative field. But he was the least manipulative person, or he was not manipulative person at all. He was all heart. He will speak whatever his जो भी है बोल देगा टाइप का वो वाला पर्सन था, बहुत जिंदा दिल था. He liked to laugh. He used to laugh so much. He liked to eat food. He was a great cook. He had made food for us for a long time. मतलब मैंने उसके घर पे खाना खाया है, मैंने उसके ऑफिस में खाना खाया है. He has introduced me to food जब मैं नहीं खाता था उतना. So yeah, he was something else. I don't think they make uh, people like them.
I
So
see.
yeah, it's a huge personal loss for me,
Right. I
because
can
I
understand.
am what I am because of him.
I see. And creatively, what do you think would you take? Did you take away from him in terms of as a writer, maybe as a director?
I think I took discipline from him, because he was our mentor at UTV Motion Pictures, and he kind of introduced us to a system or technique or whatever you can say. At least I do it this way, and you guys can try it if you can follow this method. And I tried to do that, and it helped me. It has helped me. Like, for example, uh, I didn't know anything about writing, honestly speaking. I had written only one act play or couple of one act plays in Pune in Marathi. But when it came to feature film writing or screenwriting, I had only read about stuff. I had read screenplays, but we were never taught how to write a feature film screenplay. I had written short film script, but that's completely a different thing. But when I came to UTV Motion Pictures and Nishi was kind of mentoring us, like, for example, outlining was the thing which I learned from him. I had only heard about it, but I think I still outline everything, and I guess it helps immensely. And that is one thing. And he always, like I said, discipline. You have to be. You have to keep at it. You can't just अच्छा मैं 4 महीना नहीं रुकूंगा. Writers can't do that. मतलब even Nishi while pitching his own project, he was so busy, and yeah, I have always seen him writing. And the one unique thing about him was we used to write on laptops, but he used to write on paper
Wow,
with a
longhand.
pen. Yeah. So I have never seen him typing away on the laptop. He was kind of illiterate when it came to typing on a laptop. He used to like एक की दबाया दो की दबाया. He was like that. But you give him pen and paper, and he will be like be writing pages and pages after pages.
Incredible.
So
Incredible.
yeah. So basically, structure, drama, everything came from him, and character.
I see.
Yeah.
Okay.
But honestly speaking, it was never a kind of thing. अच्छा मैं तुम्हें सिखाता हूँ ये तुम मुझसे सीखो.
Right.
It's never like that, right? Any great lesson we learn is always from. It's always kind of passive and very organic, and we kind of learn from watching people at work, and we can't pinpoint at what time we learn what. It kind of trickles down into our work, and that's how we also realize, okay, maybe I've learned this from this kind of this. Yeah.
Makes sense. Yes, yes. Upendra, I always found Mumbai Meri Jaan somewhat similar to the 2004 Oscar winning film Crash in terms of its structure with the intertwining stories, as well as thematically. Both films kind of grappled with class divide, the social and racial tensions. In a big metro city, in Crash, of course, the setting is LA. Here we are looking at Mumbai. Was Crash an influence when you guys were writing Mumbai Meri Jaan?
I think it was not a very deliberate influence. But for example, I had seen Amores Perros before. I had seen 21 Grams
Right.
before even Crash came. So, and we were kind of zapped by the whole structure and how these different thematic plot lines kind of collide into each other. And here, we didn't have to create something which will make these characters collide. There already was a common incidence, so it all germinated from that one common incidence. And then we decided, okay, they can cut across each other's path, but let's not force them. Let's see where they go. So
I
it
see.
was not
Okay.
a deliberate कि अच्छा वो क्रैश जैसा करते ऐसा कुछ नहीं
Right.
था.
Right. Right.
Yeah.
Right. Maybe
But we
because.
knew that obviously there will be it is a kind of multi-track kind of feature film,
Right.
and eventually it will collide or come together at the end. Something will that will happen. That's that we knew.
Gotcha. Both Patil and Kadam are such terrific characters.
Yeah,
Paresh Rawal and Vijay More are just excellent in those
absolutely.
roles.
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
And, I just have noted down two lines here. Patil साहब 2 सेकंड लगते हैं शैतान को आदमी में घुसने के.
Yeah.
And I remember Patil says that मैं तेरा सीनियर तेरे को ऑर्डर देता है कदम मुत.
Kadamut.
But I think these two lines, so nicely encapsulate, the psyche of these two characters. There is tragedy to them. There is also hope to them. Patil kind of sees his younger self in Kadam somewhere, if you will. And we
Yeah,
dread that Kadam too might end up like Patil
like
at the
him.
end of his career, someone who regrets not having broken the mold or done any
Yeah,
quote unquote real work in his entire career. But there's
correct.
also hope, right? Because Patil urges his younger colleagues to not end up like him and urges them to actually do something, and make a difference. Could you talk about writing these two characters, their character arcs, and the dynamics between the two?
So that whole track was inspired again by a real incident which happened. I guess if I remember correctly, which happened in Villeparle East,
Oh, wow.
East or
Okay.
West. So and we read it in the newspaper next day of the blast that a cop, I guess Hawaldar, was returning from the duty late night after the on the same night of the blast. He was returning home and he encountered a group of youngsters who were drunk, and they kind of actually said those things कि अरे आपके वैसे हुआ, you are not doing your duty, and they beat him up. That incident was reported in newspapers, and it kind of remained with us. And at that time, while after when we decided, okay, we have we want to write this. So apart from anything which मतलब अंदर से आता है, apart from that we are also looking for actual stories. We are kind of combing through newspaper articles, news items, anything which can help us basically. So this incident stuck into our minds, and we knew that we have to tell the story of this cop, because there was kind of backlash against cops for being, and it always happens whenever something like this happens, everyone blames cops, and "Oh, you were sleeping, you only know how to take bribes, but you don't do your duty," and blah blah blah. So that incident was in our minds, and we wanted to tell that story of that person. And coincidentally, now the whole film was written on the footpath of Vileparle East. So on Hanuman Road there is a tea shop called Gokul, and it's a famous tea shop called Gokul.
Okay.
It's on the junction of Hanuman Road, just near Gajali Hotel. I used to live in Vileparle there at that time. Yogesh used to live in Goregaon, but he studied in Vileparle. So his all college friends are from Parle. So every evening he used to travel to Villaparle East, and we used to meet at Gokul Naka, have cutting, many cutting chais, and then we just used to talk. We just used to blabber, kind of just keep spitting ideas. And at around that time, we saw every evening two cops coming to a shop called Panshikar. So Panshikar is a franchisee of Maharashtrian snack foods.
Yes.
So every evening, these two cops used to come on a motorbike, maybe either to have chai or I don't know for what reason, but they used to come there. And one of them was young and one of them was old, absolutely like Tukaram Patil and Kadam. And we used to see them every day, and we're like, oh my god, maybe these are people. What if they are one or two of our main characters? And that's how it started. And when we found those two guys, one old one young, it's kind of gave us that directly acha ye jo about to retire kind of thing, and a guy who has already just joined the force. So you can compare it with the, what's that film, Denzel Washington and Ethan Hawke,
Training Day.
Training Day sort of scenario. At least scenario, it like क्या अच्छा एक आदमी senior है, who knows everything, who knows how system works, and this other guy is there who's kind of angry young man who wants to be idealistic and his duty and all that. And that's how we found those characters.
I see. Very interesting. I did not know this. That's a great story.
Yeah,
I haven't spent that much time in Villeparle, but I'm somewhat familiar with the area. So next time I'm in Bombay, I'll definitely try to go
yeah.
the area and check it out. So, Upendra, I want to talk much more about Patil and his retirement speech and all that. But before that, I just wanted to touch on some of the interesting characters. And of course, we cannot talk about Mumbai Meri Jaan without talking about KK Menon, who
Yeah,
played
yeah.
Suresh. Suresh is
Correct.
someone who's blinded by his communal biases. Some might argue that today, there are a lot of more people like Suresh than before,
Yeah.
because we find ourselves in an increasingly polarized world, where communal biases have been weaponized to the most vile extremes. One of my favorite scenes from the entire film, we see Patil's words about breaking the chain of hate and tensions echoing in Suresh's head, alongside with the words of his old father about how the
Yeah.
greatest lie ever told is that all religions can coexist. And Suresh kind of finds himself, juggling figuratively these two contrasting mindsets. And that's when it hits him. He has a sort of a epiphany and is finally able to see the bullshit in his communal lens and finally rise above the prejudice he holds in his heart. I love that scene because, it bears so much significance to the times and circumstances that we find ourselves in today. Do you ever think that scene would become much more relevant so many years later?
No, matlab, even I saw the film just about a week ago, and I was kind of blown away how it's extremely more than relevant to today's times. And we were like, oh my god, we didn't know that ऐसा कुछ होगा. And matlab, the scene you're talking about, I now find it extremely romantic. And I think, okay, Suresh is so easy to convince him. Okay, this is not, this is your bias and all that. But right now, you can't convince people like Suresh. They have actually gone much farther and
They
kind
have
of
crossed
beyond
the
anything.
point of
Maybe
no
it's
return. Yeah,
pretty bleak right now. So it's crazy how,
unfortunately, yes,
especially even words of even Suresh's father,
right.
and especially I'm literally I have no words basically, because I was
Yes, yes. No,
literally
I hear you.
shocked to
Yeah,
see that, oh my god, this is the exact whatever he speaks, whatever Suresh speaks at till that point, and we are actually listening those arguments right now.
yes,
What
yes,
he always does, what he always argues कि देखो ये ऐसा करते हैं वो ऐसा करता है ये देखो,
right.
and that's the exact arguments we are listening right now from
Yes,
all those blinded fanatics,
yes.
which is crazy. And it was yeah,
And this is 2008, so this is almost 15 years ago. And that's a
yeah,
great point that you just made. That the exact argument, if you drill it down, that's the exact argument that we're hearing from these fanatics. And what I absolutely, abhor and hate about that is that they try to tie in like something like from the Mahabharata or Akhanda Bharat and those
yeah,
kind of
yeah,
concepts to kind of rally, their this kind of fervor. So, and
correct,
Mumbai Meri Jaan did just that. I mean, his father uses those words. He quotes Sri Krishna,
exactly,
and he also talks about Akhanda Bharat, and we are not cowards, and all that kind of speak. So it's very interesting because this was 15 years ago, and maybe
yeah.
it just passed. Another thing, Upendra, do you think this kind of scene would have survived today? I mean, there would
No,
have been
not at
so many
all,
people who would
not
have
at all.
taken objection
we,
to it.
we would have suffered that hashtag boycott Mumbai Meri Jaan kind of thing. They boycott Bollywood, boycott Mumbai Meri Jaan because of, this is the insult of Hindutva. Like, for example, if we think that in 2008 there was one Suresh, today already there are thousand Suresh with quite like 3.0 kind of upgraded versions.
Yeah,
It's
it's sad. Yeah. And it's fascinating to look at that character played by KK Menon, Suresh, because I always, like to contrast that with a scene from Black Friday, where he plays Rakesh Maria. And the
yeah,
scene that I'm talking about is where KK, gives an earful to Aditya Srivastav, who plays Bacha Khan, about being an asshole in the name of religion. He essentially says, and I quote, हर वो आदमी जिसके पास कुछ नहीं है करने को धर्म के नाम पे चूतिया बनता रहेगा. And interestingly, in Mumbai Meri Jaan, Suresh is he could easily be counted as one of those assholes.
yeah,
So,
yeah,
I always like to contrast those two, characters that he played. And, that just tells you how good of an actor KK is, because in
yeah,
both of those roles, he literally, makes you believe that he's
yeah,
that person.
absolutely.
So the way
Yeah,
he looks, his eyes, and just everything that he does with the body language and everything. So that I always found interesting. Any anecdotes about working with KK? Working with
I guess it
actors?
was most very comfortable working with him. He was extremely friendly. He was approachable. He was accessible, and I guess he's a very extremely generous actor. So normally, if anyone comes like co-star comes up with a suggestion or something, mostly we hear that star कि अच्छा नहीं तू मत ले मैं लेता हूँ अच्छा डायलॉग अगर किसी ने just suggest किया तो बोलता है कि अच्छा ये लाइन मैं ले लेता हूँ. But KK used to do opposite. So if someone comes, Costa comes up with a line, and Keiko would say, "Okay, अरे ये ले ले तू अच्छा है," and then the Costa would say, "नहीं मैं अगर ले लिया नहीं निशी सर को पूछना पड़ेगा वो नहीं बोलेंगे," and KK would ask Nishikant कि अरे ये मसला है ना इसको लेने दे, and which is I guess amazing. And like you said, the way he looks at the whole Yusuf gang, and from the first frame how he feels about them. And it's not only at Yusuf, the way he talks about Zidane, and he says, "ये भाई कब से बन गया तेरा?" So from the word go, he is at it. So we realize he's 24/7. He's completely lost here, totally.
Absolutely, yeah. I mean, his biases are extremely strong. And
But
he.
also, I need to make a point that still why he's still, I won't say easy, but you can still bring Suresh back from that whole blindingness, because it's all tied up to survival eventually. And we wanted to make that point because he doesn't have money. He makes that point in the first scene कि अरे 10 रुपए है, 10 रुपए में पूरा दिन काटना है. And eventually the whole cycle of it kind of comes to a kind of first temporary halt when he needs money, and that guy approaches him at Hajali and says कि अच्छा है करना है, and वो he just kind of crumples the card saying कि अरे मैंने इनके लिए काम करूंगा. But I guess eventually survival and money will bring you back to the harsh reality, and only that's when you will realize that all this bullshit of hatred is actually bullshit, and it doesn't help you in any way. So it's that makes Suresh kind of redeemable.
I see. Right. Yeah, that's interesting. That's a great scene too at Haji Ali that you mentioned. Very, I think it's the visiting card says Kareem and Associates or something, and
Yeah.
he he's not too keen on working with them first. But like you said, yeah, for survival he does that. But that helps him, kind of see the bullshit.
That kind of paves the way because he meets them, they talk him, they give him respect, and suddenly the change starts happening.
Very interesting. Yeah, that's why I think, Mumbai Meri Jaan is such a relevant film today. And, a lot of, I think the younger millennials haven't seen this film. And that was one of the reasons why I wanted to do this podcast episode. Because first of all, I love this film. And, like I said, I have always loved this film. But I usually try to cover films on the podcast, that I think many people have not seen, especially the younger kids. And I want them to see the films that, not just because I like them, but, maybe there is something different that people were making this,
Right.
10, 15 years ago, 20 years ago, 30
Right.
years ago. So, that's why I love this particular film. Upendra, let's talk about Patil's retirement speech,
Yeah.
which is an absolute emotional gut punch. He talks about everything from his father to how much the city has changed over the years, to his feelings on the day of the bomb blast, how he felt like someone having, broken Mumbai into 7 pieces, alluding to the formation of Mumbai city, and the 7 original islands that became Mumbai. Patil is an old man. There's a lot he wants to say. There's a lot in his mind. And at one point, he even wonders, how did we end up calling a Diwali firecracker an atom bomb? So his musings are all over the map. All his musings in that speech are loaded, so to speak. They make you think about a lot of things. As
Yeah.
writers, you and Yogesh, what was your goal with that retirement speech?
There were two things we wanted to do, and most of the credit goes to Yogesh for writing brilliant speech, basically. And the idea was always the whole 7 islands, 7 blasts was the kind of very idea which we kind of succumbed to very early. So initially there used to be initial opening sequence was supposed to be about 7 islands and how it became Mumbai. That was kind of supposed to, but obviously then it changed. And when we came down to climax, we realized we can connect that with the history of Mumbai with history of Patil, along with the whatever is happening in all other 4 tracks. So it was always supposed to be a speech which will bind everything together. It's kind of मतलब सारे फिल्म का सार है उसमें, kind of. So all things we wanted to say about, and maybe which we haven't been able to say through images or whatever, and let's say here, because Patil is a talkative person. We have already established that he loves to talk, and he loves to share anecdotes. So that was the thing, and then Yogesh just took it and ran away with it and just wrote a beautiful scene.
Yeah,
And
and
obviously Paresh sir made it even better.
yes, yes, he's absolutely excellent. But I love the way that speech is written because it is so authentic. It's, usually when we see retirement speeches or something in films, they seem like, they're extremely heavily drafted and, it's
Yeah.
something that they have memorized. But this is how a person who would speak on his last year job, that he has spent his whole life at. and someone who is fairly elderly, someone whose
Yeah.
maybe thoughts are not scrambled a little bit, someone who's
Correct.
overcome with emotion so much, that
Yeah.
even that,
Yeah.
and that is reflected in the way, he kind of
Yeah.
jumps all over the
He
map.
kind of jumps from one point to completely different topic.
Absolutely. And,
Like because
it's all, you
that's
can
how
tie
people
that
speak.
together. Yeah, I thought that was great. And so that's why, it stands out as an authentic kind of a retirement speech.
Yeah.
That's something
Yeah.
like someone called Tukaram Patil on his last day at work would say something like
Correct.
this. It
Because
doesn't.
I don't think even he expect matlab, anybody expects ki one Havaldar will be called on to give a speech. Even he won't be expecting that, right? So ऐसा नहीं कि उसने speech prepared किया है और अब वो now he will take out and shit and will he won't do that. He will just speak whatever is on his mind at that moment.
Absolutely.
So yeah, it
Absolutely.
was very organic.
Yes, yes. And it comes through it. Madhavan's character, nicely captures the mood of many 20 somethings, around the turn of the
Yeah,
century. Middle class, by the book, 9 to 5, working folks, for whom the terrorist attacks and the resulting trauma and shock kind of forced them to think about their future, and ponder if the best aspirational move for them was perhaps moving abroad, which
yeah,
no longer is the case today, but was certainly one of the more promising options around that time. And I know a lot of people like that, who initially did not want to leave, India or go abroad or something, but things like these, kind of pushed them into reconsidering their options abroad. So I thought, even that was very nicely done, because Madhavan
yeah,
is someone who doesn't want to leave India, right? But then we see that Nishikant Kamat plays one of his friends
yeah.
who comes from abroad. And so even Madhavan kind of starts thinking, maybe this might be the best move for him, since, they're planning a family, a baby's on the way and so forth. So even that character is nicely done.
Yeah.
Any thing you would like to touch upon Madhavan's
I
character?
think that was the character which was closest to our lives because we are from middle class.
Correct.
So we have actually seen people who were afraid boarding the train on next day, but they had to because they had no choice. So I have read about it. I've heard about from them. कि अच्छा अरे impossible. I was so it is kind of a trauma which people went through, and we wanted one character who has actually been part of the tragedy. For all of the other characters, they are still on kind of they are outside because they are affected, but they are indirectly affected. They were not there when the blast happened, and we wanted one character who is kind of victim, not that kind of victim who is actually injured or who die. Of course, not because that would be ghost, but someone who has uh, who actually saw what happened and obviously it would have been great that he just survived because of luck. And that's what happens with Madhav's character. That's what happens with Nikhil Agarwal. And so that's what attracted us to tell his story because he is actually a very middle class common man and we have made him a very kind of ideal citizen. He's a model citizen. He's kind of always preaching people what is right and what is wrong. And when that person's values are shaken, then that is what we were very interested to find out what happens. One guy who is kind of like he said, "Tum bano deshbhakt wala jo dialogue hai isme." So he is a true patriot, and his journey from being a patriot to I don't want to live in this country because I feel kind of I'm afraid, not for me but also for my unborn child and my wife, for my family. I think it's a very relatable graph. At that point of time, it was relatable to many people who used to travel regularly via local train. So yeah,
Absolutely. Yeah, yeah. Even for
that
someone
was the
like me,
idea.
and that's the most relatable character. And it's also a nicely shaped character, and it conveys like I said, the mood of a certain group, very nicely.
Yeah,
So that's another great character. Mumbai Meri Jaan also talks about many things, which were not often touched upon, in mainstream Hindi films at least. Stuff like the sensationalist tendencies of the media, the attitudes toward the police of the entitled. And now it makes sense since you said that, this was based on a true incident. General attitudes toward underprivileged migrant workers, even something like mental health and acute stress disorder. Was
Yeah.
all of this like intentional, or this just it's part of the story that you're trying to tell? I understand that, but did you guys make a conscious effort to talk about some of those difficult topics, or at least touch upon them?
No, we didn't. Honestly speaking, I guess this was my first film as a writer. And I think till date, that is the most organic script I've ever written. We never thought about any kind of formulas or, themes. Let's talk about mental health or let's talk about trauma. We never thought about it at all for even one single second. We just, we just found that story fascinating. We just found those characters fascinating, and that's why we told the story. For example, for even Thomas, in Mumbai, it's very common to see those coffee vendors on bicycle even today. And that was a great combination also because me, I am from Pune, so I am kind of outsider to Mumbai. And Yogesh has been born and brought up in Mumbai, so he knows everything. The whole, for example, the whole Paresh Rawal speech scene where he says ki we used to go roam on the airport. That was something which he was told by his grandfather or something. ऐसा कुछ तो भी किस्सा है उसका. So that authentic knowledge and actually is living there, and plus my kind of third person point of view towards Mumbai kind of helped maybe. But we never thought about कि अच्छा क्या formula. Also, there was no zero pressure or kind of anything from Nishi as well as producers. We actually wrote what we wanted to write, and then of course there was feedback and there was adjustments. But ऐसा नहीं थी अरे ये थोड़ा offensive हो रहा है या ये थोड़ा ऐसा हो रहा है. There was nothing that sort of discussion. It was the kind of best writing experience any writer could have. You just write, you don't think about what will anybody say or what budget can what budgeted requirement can come up with. For example, we wrote kind of mall scenes in the Irfan's track, and I remember our DOP Sanjay Zadav, we call him Dada, and he was like, "क्या रे तुम राइटर अच्छा तुम लिख ले तो एक मॉल इंटीरियर मॉल और घबराहट फैल जाती है क्राउड इज रनिंग लेकिन हमें शूट करना है." So, but we could write that. I guess that freedom is amazing, and I guess because it was my first film, I didn't give a shit about what other people are actually thinking कि execute कैसे करेंगे. I just wanted to write what I wanted to write. The same with Yogesh. We wanted to tell a story कि अच्छा हमें ये story पता है. कैसे execute करेंगे क्या करेंगे वो आप देख लो. You're a great director, you're a great DOP, you're a great team. So you guys do that. So I guess that purity somewhere showed through. That I always thought that because there was no restriction, there was no agenda. So अरे हम मुझे थोड़ा वर्क फ्रेंडली बनाना है तब तो कुछ था ही नहीं. तब ऐसा कुछ नहीं था कि आई नीड टू ये इशू डालना है फिल्म में और ऐसा कुछ नहीं था. सो वी जस्ट वांटेड टू टेल अ स्टोरी एंड we did that exactly.
I also, like, how there are so many Marathi actors in this movie, obviously,
Yeah,
because Nishikant Kamat was Marathi and, you guys are
yeah,
also
yeah,
Maharashtrians,
right,
from the
yeah,
smallest roles to some of the key roles like Kadam, there is, and some of these, I discovered like, many years later, yeah, but there is Samir Saugule is there,
yeah, yeah, yeah.
of course, Santosh Joglekar is there, Vibhavari Deshpande is there. And of course, there is also you in a small cameo. Don't panic, don't panic.
Don't panic.
So that,
But that's not my voice. So
oh, that's dubbed. Okay.
that's dubbed by Nishi himself because he thought I was not panicky enough. I was sounding very much calm. So he said, I'm going to dub it. You're not in panic enough. So I said, okay. So it's his voice and my face.
Very interesting anecdote. Thanks for sharing that. I did not realize that. The movie ends on a very hopeful note, closing with Ye Hai Bombay Meri Jaan from CID, arguably the most popular, film song ode to the city. A city that, as Mumbai Meri Jaan shows, somehow always manages to muster the courage and show good sense in conquering its fears and prejudices. I always like to hear from writers about writing endings, writing good endings as something to learn for myself as well as aspiring writers. What can you share with us about the ending here and the thinking behind it?
So when we started writing, we always knew that there has to be a kind of time frame to the story, because obviously we were talking about people who were affected, and we can't just go on. So we have to have some kind of time frame. And obviously it was again very organic to come to that idea that obviously Mumbai stood still after 7 days for 2 minutes in the memory of all the victims. And we immediately thought that is the best point to end the film. And then from that moment, we're always driving all those stories towards that moment when everything will come to standstill. Obviously, the idea of using that song was not ours, it was Nishi's idea. So that credit goes to him. But yeah, from the start we knew what is the end. So end is that the whole city will come to standstill, and obviously our characters won't know that. So they are not in the knowledge कि अच्छा अभी ये 2 मिनट का silence है, हमें उसको follow करना है. So if you see, every character is kind of oblivious, because obviously they are into their own traumas and struggles, so they don't know it. Like for example, Irfan is in a completely different note, and he's kind of defending कि मैंने कुछ नहीं किया, I'm sorry, that zone, especially when he comes across Vijay Maurya's character. So yeah, that was always the end.
I see. And Upendra, you mentioned that initially the idea was to start with a montage of the history of Mumbai, of how it was formed, and that was
Yeah,
changed. Can you talk about why that was changed and what
I
was the initial
I
idea?
I don't remember exactly, but I think I have no clue. But obviously, so many ideas were thrown there. Ki what would be the opening montage or title montage? And eventually, Nishi decided to let's show the history kind of. So the current montage is it starts with the black and white footage, and slowly it goes into current color kind of montage. So I guess also might have been due to the VFX and all that thing, because you have to create a sequence where the seven islands and come. Then obviously there was also to be information which is you have to verbally you have to give that information. If there is a तो सात island थे फिर ऐसे हुआ, it can't be shown visually, it can't be very appealing, especially at the start of the film. So I think that's the reason why Nishi completely changed it, and now you see it, you just see the journey of Mumbai visually, and you don't have to spoon feed anything to the audience, and it directly kind of connects to what is the theme of the movie, what is the title of the movie. So the story is about Mumbai, so it directly kinds of communicates to audience very well.
And Mumbai Meri Jaan, like I said, is a great film. But always, over the years, when you look back, you might see something that you, as a writer or director or one of the filmmakers, that you might think, hey, maybe given a chance, I could have fleshed this out a little bit more, or maybe polish this bit a little bit more. Is there something that stands out or sticks itself out like that for you when you rewatch that film today?
Uh, I don't honestly, maybe because it's my first film, so I'm still not very much objective about that, especially that film because it's my first film.
Right.
So right now it looks, but not from writing point of view, right? But yeah, I think it still works for me.
Yes. Yes. Yes.
Even as an audience, I saw it after so many years and like, oh my god, okay, good work,
Yes, yes,
not
it
bad,
holds up very
not
well,
bad.
and in fact,
Yeah,
like we were saying, it's even more relevant and significant today.
yeah,
So,
absolutely.
and a great point that you made that since it's your first baby, so to speak, it's hard to
Yeah,
kind of look at it objectively, and
yeah.
kind of see. So that's very interesting. Um, Anything else, Upendra, you would like to add? Any interesting anecdotes that we might not have touched upon, or anything that you feel like sharing about the film?
Yeah, so many things were inspired from actual true stories. So, for example, the end point of KK's character का story, जहाँ पे हमें पता चलता है कि यूसुफ एक्चुअली शिरडी गया था, that was also inspired from the true story. So actually ऐसा हुआ था कि एक बस्ती के कुछ मुस्लिम युवक गायब हो गए, and actually people thought in the residents of the बस्ती thought कि अरे कुछ कुछ तो भी गड़बड़ है, बट वो ऑब्वियसली 2 दिन के बाद ही तुरंत लौटे, उनको पता चला कि वो शिरडी है. So that was the kind of kissa we knew. and so we kind of incorporated. Also, we had written 9 stories initially. Yeah, so there were 4 more stories, and obviously because of the time constraint, we had to uh, filter them down to 5. But there were more stories, and I was just going through my notes for this podcast, and I think, wow, those were also interesting stories. Again, all of them, most of them were inspired from the newspaper clippings of the real incidences which happened during the blast.
Could you
So
share in a
yeah,
nutshell? Do you mind sharing in a nutshell what those four stories were?
yeah. So one of them was about a couple of ward boys, a ward boy. I guess his name is Ramesh, and I guess his cousin or friend, his name is Gopal, and he's a ward boy, and obviously he's stuck in that life, and they are from UP, and they want to get out of there, and he wants to marry a nurse whose name is Chitra, and but he's poor, he doesn't have money, and that's when the blasts happen, and his duty is in the morgue, and he's watching lots of bodies coming in, and he also knows, and his friend, that Ramesh or Gopal, the other guy. So other guy tells him there is a scheme from by which we can earn money, because railways have announced a reward, kind of not help basically for victims, kind of 5 lakhs, and state has declared 1 lakh. So these people can get 6 lakhs, and there must be any bodies who are not claimed. So I can come and claim, and we'll have 6 lakhs. We'll kind of divide 3 lakh each, and that's the plan they come up with. And that's what actually happened. Actually, there are many cases where it happened. So Ramesh and Gopal decide to do that, and Ramesh goes there and claim कि अरे ये मेरा body है, मेरे relative का है. He all does the nautanki and all that, and they get the money, but and eventually kind of they get caught at the police station when there is a 2 minute silence. At the same time, they are caught. So that was the one story. There was similar story, maybe that's why both got cut. There was another story where, again inspired from the true incidents, कि अस्पताल में मौत हो जाती है किसी की, an elderly man who is there because of accident, some kind of road accident or something like that, और उसकी बूढ़ी सी बीवी है, एंड वो मर जाता है, बट बिकॉज ऑन द डेथ सर्टिफिकेट, by mistake it's written as blast victim, and now mother wants to rectify that mistake, saying कि अरे नहीं है, blast से नहीं मरे हैं हमारे, so she wants to rectify, but the son wants that money. So son
Ah, very
decides
interesting.
to kind of manipulate her mother as well to get that money. So that was one story. Then there was a story about a bookseller. So there is one small kid who's called name is Altaf, and whose father is kind of mobile stealer. So like there is a huge scheme, very well known scheme कि ट्रैफिक सिग्नल पे एक विंडो पे से कोई बुक बेचने आएगा. So you will roll down the windows, and at the same time from the other window someone will steal your purse, wallet, or phone, something like that. So they are a team. And after blast, and they are Muslims, so Altaf and I guess Abdul or something father's name was, and they are living in a slum. So after blast, Abdul is picked up by police as a suspect, because I guess I heard there were dozens of suspects were picked up from various bastis, and they were detained and they were interrogated because they had to do that. Cops had to take some action, and and their hut or whatever, that patra ka jhopdi, it's demolished by BMC at the same time. So now that little kid Altaf comes on footpath, and now he has to survive because he has no family. So that story, another story was Altaf's. Then the पाव वाला, वो who huge combination scene में जो पाव वाला है, वो हरास करने जाता है कि उसको, and that's when Paresh sir comes. So there was a story from his point of view.
Ah, very
So there was
interesting.
a
Okay.
story, Pawala story, who lives a very decent life. He's a nice person who has a son who was there helping all the victims and taking out bodies from the train. So one son is there, and his daughter is interested in acting. So she's doing a kind of theater play from college, but she hasn't told at home, and she kind of changes her wardrobe and all that stuff was there. And suddenly, after this incident with Suresh, with KK, the father completely changes. And father says, "What is the point? Burqa पहनना शुरू कर दो. Now there's no need." So suddenly, how the radicalization can start, and how can that be triggered just from one incident? And not only one person, but the whole family can completely go down in that way. So that was one story. Yeah.
Very interesting. Yeah,
So couple
thanks a
of
lot for sharing those.
interesting stories. Yeah.
Yes,
Yeah.
yes, yes. All interesting stories. I mean, especially the last one that you mentioned, and even the first one about the ward boy is very interesting.
Yeah. 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 So we kind of actually we wrote all those stories, and then obviously we knew how, at what point they're going to interject, and then we kind of just did the cross cutting. Yeah, but we actually wrote them as kind of short films. So
I see.
we wrote separate scripts for every story,
I see. And
and
how
then
many drafts of Mumbai Meri Jaan did you write?
oh wow, I think so. Not many, because my writing style is completely different from Yogesh, and that means Yogesh's writing style is completely different from Nishi's. So, like I said, we wrote that film on footpath, because Yogesh, his style was, at least at that time, that he never wrote anything unless it's pakka in his head. So we used to kind of go in every scene by scene, every day, kind of making it concrete, but not writing anything. And of course, I used to keep some notes, because I don't believe myself or my memory. But he was amazing, and it was all in here. And then one day when okay, abhi likhna padega, kuch bhi okay. And then we just kind of locked ourselves in a room and then typed it all out. Yeah.
I see.
So they were not kind of 10 drafts or something.
Right.
But we took 9 months to write this script. But yeah,
I see.
but not 9 drafts, I guess, lesser drafts.
Okay.
But there were certain scenes which kept kind of getting rewritten. For example, the whole scene between Paresh sir and KK in the van, police van, when kind of Paresh Rawal says, कि, okay, iska naam ye hai, wo hai, and the whole chain
Adam
tootne
Sheikh
ke
and
wala,
right.
that thing. That, yeah, Adam Sheikh, yeah. So that scene was being rewritten till the last minute. So I didn't, because I was also assistant director. So there is a road behind in Orbit Mall in Malad. So we shot there, and I was in charge of carrying the chits of the scene to the van, and I used to sarkao that chit through the grills of that police van. Catch ye dialogue hai abhi. So yeah, great.
Hey, what's the cafe where the KK's friends hang out? Is that that's a real cafe,
No,
right?
yeah, thanks for saying that, but it's not. So it's all, it's, yeah, it was amazing. And it was outside Santa Cruz Station West. So the road, the lane outside Santa Cruz Station, that's where we found a kind of gala आपण म्हणतो, दुकान. We found an empty shop basically,
Right.
and वहाँ पे set लगाया था. We kind of we look for actual cafes, but and the cafes we love were too crowded, or at a very at place, or at a position, or on the street which is very crowded. So it was it would have been very difficult to shoot there. So eventually they built a set, and it was such a great set that initially a couple of customers just walked in thinking that it's actually a cafe,
Right.
because they all the stuff was real, everything was freshly baked.
It looks
So
real.
they
It
were,
looks real. Yeah.
yeah,
Especially the
because
spacing and everything. It looks very real.
absolutely, it was kind of almost working cafe.
I see. Very interesting.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's what I was thinking. Like, it looks real. So I said, maybe if it's real, it's another place that.
Yeah, it was almost, it was 90%, you're right. Yeah.
Right, right. Great, great. Well, thank you so much, Upendra. I think this was a
Thank you.
lovely
Thank
chat.
you, man.
And
Same here.
I really enjoyed talking with you about this film. And I hope that a lot
Thank
of
you.
people discover this film after listening to this
Yeah,
podcast.
I hope so. I sincerely
So
hope so.
that would be nice. By the way, this film streams on Netflix, so you can watch a very good copy of the film on Netflix. And thanks again, Upendra. I appreciate it.
Thanks, Himanshu. It was great to just go down the memory lane and you know, great memories associated with this film because this will be always a special film
Right.
because
Understandably.
it's
Yes.
my first film as a writer. Plus, it was my first collaboration with Nishi. And
That made it special. Thank you so much.
thank you, Himanshu. Thank you.
If you liked the episode, do share this episode on Twitter, Instagram, or Facebook. And do subscribe to the podcast wherever you listen to your pods. Also, please do rate and review the pod. You can follow me on Twitter and Instagram at loveofcinemasf8. Feel free to reach out there or by email with your comments, feedback, and suggestions. You can find my email in the episode notes. That's the episode. This is Himanshu signing off. And like always, thank you for listening to the Love of Cinema podcast.